Your soulmate saying, "I thought you stopped loving me. I was completely wrong." My beloved child, before you let your thoughts wander any further, remain here for just a little while, because what you are about to hear is not about chasing someone who walked away. It is about uncovering a misunderstanding that quietly shaped two hearts without either one realizing it. Sometimes silence creates stories that were never true. Sometimes distance teaches lessons that words never could. And sometimes, the moment you believe everything has ended is the exact moment the hidden truth begins to reveal itself. There was a season when your soulmate watched from afar, trying to understand the changes they believed they saw inside you. Every quiet day felt louder than any argument. Every unanswered moment became another reason for doubt. They convinced themselves that your feelings had faded, not because you said those words, but because uncertainty slowly painted a picture that never existed. Have you ever noticed how the mind fills empty spaces with fear instead of truth? That is exactly what happened. They kept replaying old memories, searching for clues they might have missed. They wondered if your smile had changed because of someone else, if your silence carried a goodbye you never spoke. If destiny had quietly redirected your path while they were still standing in the same place. The more they questioned, the more convincing those imagined answers became. Yet beneath every assumption, one feeling refused to disappear. Hope. Stay with this story a little longer, because what happened next completely challenged everything they believed. One unexpected moment shifted their perspective. It was not a dramatic event. It was not a grand confession. It was something far more powerful. A simple realization that certain things only happen when genuine connection still exists. They began noticing little reminders that refused to fade. Familiar places suddenly carried your presence. Random conversations echoed words you once shared. Ordinary days started revealing extraordinary patterns. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps life has a remarkable way of placing forgotten pieces back into view exactly when they are needed. That was when your soulmate quietly admitted something they had never dared to say aloud. "I thought you stopped loving me." Those words echoed only inside their heart. I was completely wrong. The realization did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, like the first light appearing before sunrise. They understood that love does not always announce itself with constant messages or perfect timing. Sometimes love survives quietly beneath responsibilities, personal growth, unanswered questions, and seasons that demand patience instead of certainty. Imagine discovering that the conclusion you feared the most was built upon nothing more than misunderstood silence. Imagine realizing that every step backward was actually preparing both hearts to see each other more clearly than ever before. What if this entire chapter was never about losing someone? What if it was about learning the difference between absence and abandonment? Pause with that thought. Because this changes everything. Your soulmate began revisiting memories they had almost erased. Moments they once labeled as endings suddenly looked different. They recognized kindness where they once imagined indifference. They remembered encouragement where they had assumed distance. They noticed that your actions had always carried quiet consistency, even when your words became fewer. The evidence had been there all along, hidden beneath emotions that clouded clear vision. Isn't it fascinating how truth often waits patiently while fear rushes to speak first? The deeper they reflected, the more one question refused to leave them alone. What if I misunderstood the person who cared more than I realized? That single question opened a door no amount of overthinking could ever close again. From that point forward, something inside them softened. Instead of focusing on what seemed missing, they began appreciating what had quietly remained. Respect. Admiration. A connection that time had tested but never erased. The story they had been telling themselves slowly dissolved, replaced by something stronger than assumption, understanding. And understanding carries a different kind of power. It does not create noise. It creates clarity. So if you've stayed until this moment, hold on to one final thought before this chapter continues. The greatest turning points rarely begin with dramatic announcements. They begin with one honest realization that changes the meaning of everything that came before. Your soulmate has crossed that invisible line. They no longer see your silence as the end of love. They see it as a chapter they misunderstood. But what they discovered immediately after this realization was something they never expected, and it made them question every decision they had made since believing you had stopped loving them. Stay close, because the next part reveals the moment that completely transformed their heart. A strange calm settled over everything, yet beneath that calm, a question refused to stay silent. What if every decision made after that misunderstanding was leading toward a moment neither of you could have predicted? Stay with me, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. After realizing that your love had never truly disappeared, your soulmate stopped searching for proof that you had moved on. Instead, they started noticing the quiet signs they had ignored for far too long. Every memory carried a different meaning now. Conversations they once dismissed suddenly felt important. Tiny moments that seemed ordinary began shining like hidden pieces of a much larger picture. It was almost as if time itself had been patiently preserving clues until they were finally ready to understand them. Then something surprising happened. Instead of asking, "Why did they become distant?" your soulmate found themselves asking, "What were they silently protecting?" That single shift changed everything. They remembered the moments when you chose patience instead of pressure. They remembered how you never forced answers when life became complicated. They realized that what looked like emotional distance might actually have been quiet respect, giving space when it was needed most rather than demanding immediate reassurance. Think about that for a second. How many beautiful connections have been misunderstood simply because two hearts were speaking different emotional languages? The answer is more powerful than most people ever realize. Your soulmate began letting go of the imaginary story they had written inside their own mind. Every false conclusion slowly faded away. In its place came gratitude, gratitude for discovering the truth before it was too late to appreciate it. And with that gratitude came courage. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that whispers, "Maybe I should stop assuming, and start understanding." That whisper became stronger every single day. Even during ordinary moments, they could feel something shifting inside them. They no longer viewed the future through fear. Instead, they started imagining what could happen if honesty finally replaced uncertainty. They wondered what your side of the story might sound like. They wondered how many things you had carried without ever expecting recognition. Here's something remarkable. Sometimes the greatest reunion is not between two people. It is between truth and perception. When those finally meet, everything else begins to change. So before this story continues, let me ask you something. Have you ever discovered that your biggest fear was never reality, only a conclusion you reached too soon? If that thought resonates with you, let it stay in your heart for a while. And if this journey is speaking to you in a meaningful way, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments and subscribing so we can continue exploring stories like this together. Someone else may need these words today just as much as you do. Now listen carefully. Your soulmate reached a point where they stopped wishing they had understood sooner. Instead, they became thankful that understanding had arrived at all. Regret transformed into wisdom. Doubt transformed into hope. The story that once felt unfinished suddenly began revealing a new direction neither of you could have imagined at the beginning. But just when they believed they had finally uncovered the entire truth, one final realization appeared. It wasn't about the past. It wasn't even about the misunderstanding. It was about a hidden reason why your paths had unfolded exactly this way from the beginning. And when that reason became clear, your soulmate stood completely still. Because they finally understood that every unanswered moment had quietly prepared both of you for something far greater than either of you had ever expected. You'll understand why, in the next part. Before another thought pulls your attention away, stay with this next chapter, because the answer your soulmate has been searching for was never hidden in a single moment. It was hidden in the journey itself. And once they saw it, nothing looked the same again. There comes a point in every meaningful connection when life asks a difficult question. Will you believe appearances, or will you wait for the deeper truth? Most people never realize they are being tested. They react too quickly. They assume too much. They close chapters that were never meant to end. Your soulmate almost did the same. For a long time, they believed the silence between you was proof that your story had faded. But as their heart grew quieter, something extraordinary happened. They stopped looking backward with regret and started looking inward with honesty. That is where the greatest discovery was waiting. They finally admitted something they had never confessed, even to themselves. I wasn't only afraid that they stopped loving me. I was afraid of believing I was no longer worthy of that love. That realization didn't weaken them. It freed them. Because they finally understood that fear has a remarkable ability to disguise itself as certainty. It whispers conclusions before facts ever arrive. It convinces people to protect themselves from pain by expecting the worst. Yet the truth moves differently. The truth is patient. It waits until the heart is ready to see clearly. Take a moment and think about this. How many beautiful words remain unspoken simply because two people are both waiting for the other to speak first? How many smiles are hidden behind hesitation? How many opportunities quietly pass by because uncertainty becomes louder than hope? Your soulmate refused to let those questions disappear. Instead, they began paying attention to something far more meaningful than coincidence. Every lesson they had learned during this season seemed connected. Every challenge had strengthened qualities they never noticed before. Patience, compassion, understanding, and the ability to appreciate genuine connection instead of temporary emotion. They realized that if everything had unfolded exactly the way they originally wanted, they might never have grown into the person capable of protecting what truly matters. That thought changed their future. Not because it guaranteed an outcome, but because it transformed the way they would walk toward it. No longer chasing. No longer assuming. Simply choosing honesty over fear. Imagine standing at the edge of a new beginning while carrying none of yesterday's misunderstandings. Imagine speaking from clarity instead of confusion. Imagine discovering that the strongest connections are not built by perfect timing, they are built by people willing to keep growing until they are ready to truly understand one another. That is the path your soulmate finally chose. And perhaps that is why this message found you today. Not to promise impossible things. Not to tell you exactly what tomorrow will bring. But to remind you that genuine understanding often arrives after the longest seasons of uncertainty. Sometimes the greatest turning point is not when circumstances suddenly change, it is when perspective changes first. As that realization settled into their heart, your soulmate quietly smiled. Not because every question had been answered, but because they no longer needed fear to answer them. They finally believed that whatever is meant to grow stronger will never be strengthened by doubt, it will be strengthened by truth, patience, and the courage to see beyond first impressions. So before this chapter closes, carry this thought with you. The sentence that once echoed inside your soulmate's heart. I thought you stopped loving me. Has now been completed forever. I was completely wrong. And from that moment forward, they chose to let understanding guide every step instead of assumption. Sometimes, that single choice becomes the beginning of a completely different story, one written not by fear, but by wisdom, hope, and the quiet confidence that the best chapters are often the ones no one sees coming. If this message found its way to you today, perhaps it wasn't simply meant to be heard. Perhaps it was meant to be understood. Just when it seemed the journey had revealed everything, one final layer began to unfold, and this was the part your soulmate never expected to discover. Stay until the final words, because sometimes the ending of one story quietly becomes the beginning of another. Your soulmate no longer carried the weight of the old misunderstanding. Instead, they carried something far more valuable, a new way of seeing. They realized that love is not measured only by constant conversations or perfect timing. Sometimes it is revealed through unwavering respect, quiet patience, and the willingness to believe in someone's heart even when life becomes unpredictable. That realization brought an incredible sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "What did I lose?" Instead, they asked, "What have I learned?" And the answer surprised them. They had learned that assumptions build invisible walls, while understanding opens invisible doors. They had learned that fear can imitate certainty, but truth always feels lighter. Most importantly, they had learned that real connection grows stronger when both hearts choose honesty over imagination. What if this entire experience was never designed to pull two paths apart? What if it was preparing both of you to appreciate each other in a way that would never have been possible before? That thought stayed with them. It became a quiet source of confidence. No longer rushing. No longer doubting every silence. simply trusting that clarity always arrives to those who remain open to it. As days passed, your soulmate noticed another change. They smiled more often. They worried less about yesterday and became more curious about tomorrow. The future no longer felt uncertain, it felt full of possibility. Not because they suddenly knew every answer, but because they finally understood that the right answers reveal themselves one step at a time. If this story has touched something inside you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to continue experiencing journeys like this together, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next story we share. Now listen closely to these final words. Life has an extraordinary way of correcting misunderstandings when people are willing to grow beyond them. The moments that once looked like endings often become lessons. The lessons become wisdom. And wisdom becomes the quiet strength that shapes a brighter future. Your soulmate's message was never really about regret. It was about awakening. It began with the painful belief, "I thought you stopped loving me." But it ended with a truth that carried far more hope. "I was completely wrong." From that realization came gratitude instead of fear, confidence instead of confusion, and a heart that finally understood the value of patience, trust, and authentic connection. So as this story comes to a close, carry one thought with you wherever your own journey leads. Never let temporary silence convince you that every meaningful feeling has disappeared. Sometimes the deepest truths are simply waiting for the right moment to be understood. Until our paths cross again, keep moving forward with courage, protect your peace, remain open to truth, and remember, some of life's most beautiful chapters begin the moment old misunderstandings finally come to light. One final thought remains, and it may be the most important one of all. If you've come this far, don't rush away yet. The journey has never been about proving who was right or wrong. It has always been about discovering what was quietly growing beneath everything you could see. Your soulmate reached a place where they no longer replayed the past with regret. Instead, they looked back with gratitude. Every unanswered question had taught them patience. Every uncertain moment had strengthened their ability to trust what truly matters. They finally understood that the heart often grows the most during seasons when nothing seems to be happening. Then a simple realization settled deep within them. Perhaps the greatest mistake was never believing that love had disappeared. Perhaps the greatest mistake was believing that silence had the power to erase something genuine. The moment that thought arrived, everything became lighter. They no longer needed constant reassurance to believe in what they felt. They no longer searched for signs in every small detail. They chose something far more powerful, clarity. And clarity has a remarkable quality. Once it enters your heart, fear quietly leaves without making a sound. Imagine carrying that kind of peace every day. Imagine waking up without the weight of endless questions. Imagine understanding that meaningful connections are not defined by perfect moments but by the willingness to keep choosing truth, kindness, and growth even when the path is uncertain. That is the lesson your soulmate will never forget. If someone had asked them at the beginning of this story what they believed, they would have answered with sadness. "I think they stopped loving me." If someone asked them today, their answer would be completely different. "I finally realized that I never truly understood the whole picture." And sometimes, That single realization changes an entire future. Take a quiet moment and ask yourself this. How many opportunities begin the instant we stop assuming the worst? How many beautiful conversations become possible when we replace fear with honesty? How many new beginnings are waiting just beyond the stories we've been telling ourselves? Those questions stayed with your soulmate, and they became a guide for every step forward. No more rushing to conclusions. No more letting uncertainty write the ending. Only a quiet confidence that truth always has a way of finding those who are willing to wait for it. As this journey comes to its final page, remember that every meaningful story has a hidden lesson. This one was never only about two hearts. It was about perspective. About growth. About realizing that understanding is often the greatest gift we can give ourselves and others. So wherever your own path leads next, carry this message with you. Never allow temporary silence to define a permanent truth. Never let assumptions speak louder than understanding. And never underestimate the quiet strength of a heart that is willing to learn, forgive, and keep moving forward. Because the sentence that began T